Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Wicked. 2. The Clock of the Time Dragon. Frex was more concerned for Melina than she knew. He stopped at the fisherman's hut he saw and spoke with a man at the half door. Could a woman spend the day and needed the night with Melina? It would be a kindness. Frex nodded with a wince of gratitude, acknowledging without words that Melina was not a great favorite in these parts. Then, before continuing around the end of Ilswater over to Rush Margin, he stopped at a fallen tree and drew 2 letters from his sash. The writer was a distant cousin of Frex's, also a minister. Weeks earlier, the cousin had spent time and valuable ink on a description of what was being called the Clock of the Time Dragon. Frex prepared himself for the whole day's holy campaign by rereading about the idle clock. I write in haste, Brother Frexbar, to catch my impressions before they fade. The clock of the Time Dragon is mounted on a wagon and stands as high as a giraffe. It is nothing more than a tottering, freestanding theater, punched on all 4 sides with alcoves and proscenium arches. On the flat roof is a clockwork dragon, an invention of green painted leather, silvery claws, ruby jeweled eyes. Its skin is made of hundreds of overlasting dips in copper, bronze, and iron. Beneath the flexible folds of its scales is an armature controlled by clockwork. The time dragon circles on its pedestal, flexes its narrow leathery wings. They make a sound like it bellows, and belches out sulphurous balls of flaming orange stink. Below, featured in the dust of doorways, windows, and porches, are puppets, marionettes, figurines, creatures of folktale, characters of peasants and royalty alike, animals and fairies and saints. Our unionist saints, Brother Frexbar, stolen out from underneath us. I am enraged. The figures move on sprockets. They wheel in and out of doorways. They bend down the waist. They dance and dawdle and dally with each other. Who engendered the time dragon, this fake oracle, this propaganda tool for wickedness that challenged the power of unionism and that of the unnamed god? The clock's handlers were a dwarf and some narrow-waisted minions who seemed to only have enough brain capacity among them to pass a hat. Who else was benefiting besides the dwarf and his beauty boys? The cousin's second letter had warned the clock was making its way to Rush Margins. It had told a more specific story. The entertainment began with a thrum of strings and a rattle of bones. The crowd pushed, oohing. Within the lighted window of the stage, we saw a marriage bed with a puppet wife and husband. The husband was asleep, and the wife sighed. She made a motion with her carved hands to suggest that her husband was disappointingly small. The audience shrieked with laughter. The puppet wife went to sleep herself. When she was snoring, the puppet husband sneaked out of bed. At this point above, the dragon turned on its base and pointed its talons to the crowd, indicating, without a doubt, a humble well-digger named Grind, who had been faithful, if attentive, husband. Then the dragon reared back and stretched 2 fingers on a come-hither gesture, isolating a widow named Letta and her snaggle-toothed maiden daughter. The crowd hushed and fell away from Grind, Letta, and the blushing maid as if they had been suddenly inflicted with running sores. The dragon rested again, but draped a wing over archway, which led up to reveal the puppet husband wandering out of sight. Along came a puppet widow with sprigged hair and high color, dragging along a protesting, flinty-toothed daughter. The widow kissed the puppet husband and pulled off his leather trousers. He was equipped with 2 full sets of male goods, one in front, another hanging off the base of his spine. The widow positioned her daughter on the abbreviated prong in front, and herself took advantage of the more menacing arrangement in the rear. The three puppets bucked and rocked, emitting squeals of glee. When the puppet widow and her daughter went through, they dismounted and kissed the adulterous puppet husband. Then they kneed him simultaneously fore and aft. He swung on springs and hinges, trying to hold all his wounded parts. The audience roared. Grime, the actual well-digger, swelled drops as big as grapes. Letta pretended to guffaw, but her daughter had already disappeared from shame. Before the evening was out, Greta was set upon by his agitated neighbors and investigated for this grotesque anomaly. Letta was shunned. Her daughter seems to have vanished entirely. We suspect the worst. At least Grind wasn't killed. Yet who can say how our souls have been stamped by such witnessing such a cruel drama? All souls are hostage to their human envelopes, but souls must decay and suffer at such indignity. Don't you agree? Sometimes it seemed to Frex that every internet witch and toothless gibbering seer Nos who could perform even the most transparent of spells had seized the outback district of Wen Hardings to scratch out her trade. He knew that folks from Rush Margins were humble. Their lives were hard and their hopes few. As the drought dragged on, their traditional unionist faith was eroding. Frex was aware that the clock of the time dragon continued the appeals of ingenuity and magic, and would have called the deepest reserve of religious conviction to overcome it. If his congregation could prove vulnerable to the so-called pleasure faith, succumbing the spectacle of violence, well, what next? He would prevail. He was their minister. He had pulled their teeth and buried their babies and blessed their kitchen pots for years now. He had abased himself in their names. He wandered with an unkempt beard and a begging bowl from hamlet to hamlet, leaving poor Melina alone in the minister's lodge for weeks at a time. He had sacrificed for them. They couldn't be swayed by this time-dragon creature. They owed him. He moved on, his shoulders square, jaws set, stomach in a sour uproar. The sky was brown, flying sand and grit. The wind rushed high over the hills with the sound of a tremulous wail, as if pushing through some fissure of rock on a ridge beyond any Frex could see. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. See you later.